So in 2021, the ONS reported that about 280,000 people over the age of 65 in England and Wales were living in care homes. Now, for many, that means that their retirement was looking very different from what they imagined. Now, every year, thousands of people sign over their homes to their children, believing that they're protecting their family and making a sensible choice about their legacy. Now, that can certainly feel like a generous gift, but it can actually wreck your retirement security. Now, if you do need care later in life, if the local authority believes that there's been a deliberate deprivation of assets, your home can still be treated as yours when they're assessing your care home fees. Now, that means you can end up with no protection, no control, no safety net, and importantly, no home to fall back on either. On top of that, gifting your home hands the legal control to somebody else, leaving your future exposed to perhaps their divorce, their debt, and of course, family disagreements. So before you sign anything and give away your biggest asset, in this week's video, we're going to be looking at the pros and the cons of gifting your property, as well as looking at some of the options which might be more suitable for you and your family. If you're new to this channel, a very warm welcome. Hi, my name's Simon, and I'm a chartered financial planner who's helped literally hundreds of clients, as well as their families, plan ahead with confidence by keeping more of what they've earned. So just over 10 months ago, we published this video about not losing your home to care home fees, which was watched about 300,000 times after it went viral, and you left about 1,000 comments as well. I'm going to link that video at the end of this video, but one of the most asked questions in the comments was about gifting the family home to the children. Now, for many people in their late 50s and 60s, the family home is naturally one of their biggest assets. It feels natural to want to pass this on to your children, to keep it safe from any care home costs, assessments, or to avoid the hassle of probate when the time comes. But gifting your home and simply signing it over to your children can come with some very serious risks. So I'm going to cover the pros and cons of gifting your home, why it so often backfires, but we're also going to look at some alternatives, and they're called lifetime trusts, and they might offer some better protection for both you and your family. Now, gifting a property outright is often seen as a simple solution, and people mainly do it for three reasons. Now, one of them is inheritance tax, and the hope is to reduce the value of your estate and limit any inheritance tax liability. Now, one of the biggest misunderstandings is around the 7-year rule regarding inheritance tax and care home fees. Now, if you give away an asset and live for a further 7 years, then this gift will then fall out of your estate for inheritance tax purposes. Now, another reason is avoiding probate, because probate can be very, very slow, and it can take up to 12 months, and it can cost several thousands of pounds to resolve. Now, if the property is no longer in your name, that doesn't have to go through the probate system on death. And the third reason is around care home fees. Now, many believe that by transferring the home to the children, it's then going to be protected from being sold to cover care home costs, as it's going to be deemed a disregarded asset. Now, on the surface, this looks like a very smart move, but the reality is a lot more complicated. And that's because local authorities can discount the 7-year rule when you gift away an asset. They're not really bothered about when it was gifted, but why it was gifted in the first place and what was the intent behind the gift. Now, there are a few situations where gifting can make sense. Now, if done early enough, and if you don't live in the property, I'm going to come on to that later in the video, then gifting a property can remove it from your estate. The home then passes directly to your children without probate delays. Now, everyone also knows exactly who owns the property, but these benefits are heavily outweighed by the risks for most people who are still going to be living in their home. Now, once your home is in your children's names, it legally belongs to them, and that then means they'll be able to sell it even if you still live there. If your child gets divorced, your home could form part of their divorce settlement. If your child has debts, the property could then be seized by their creditors, and they could also try to raise finance against the home, therefore putting it at risk. So you go from owning your own secure base in retirement to relying entirely on someone else's goodwill. Now, the idea of gifting your home to avoid inheritance tax is appealing, but as you would expect, HMRC has very strict rules. Now, if you gift your home to your children but continue to live in the property rent-free, that's going to be treated as a gift with reservation. That means it's still going to count as part of your estate for IST purposes, and therefore there's going to be no inheritance tax saving. Now, to avoid this, that means you're going to need to pay the full market rent to your children, and that's going to create its own tax issues. And it also means you're going to be paying rent to live in your own home. So in most cases, gifting doesn't actually achieve any inheritance tax benefit that people naturally are going to be hoping for. Now, this is one of the biggest pitfalls. Now, in England and Wales, if you do need residential care, the local authority is going to assess your assets. So if your savings and your property are worth more than £23,250, then you're going to be expected to pay all for your own care. Now, if you've recently given away or gifted your home, the council can then apply the deprivation of assets rule, where they can then treat your property as if it was yours and still ask you to pay the fees in full. So as you can see, gifting doesn't guarantee protection from care home fee costs. Now, worse still, it could leave both you and your children in a legal mess. Now, one thing I've learned from the previous care home video comment section was that if you've got substantial needs arising from a healthcare condition, you can explore whether the NHS Continuing Healthcare Fund could pay for 100% of your care costs. Now, as you can imagine, the eligibility criteria for this is going to be tough. But if you want to know some steps which might help you, then message NHS CHC in the comments. And if you've got enough people who want me to put that video together, then I can start working on that next week. And I can also put together a video on the idea of keeping the family home and then using the option of what's called a deferred payment arrangement. This is where you've got an agreement with the local authority that's going to allow you to delay paying for your care home costs until a later date and securing that debt against your home. I'll message deferred in the comments if you'd like me to put that video together. I just want to spend a minute explaining the difference between care homes and nursing homes. Now, residential care homes provide accommodation, meals, and personal care, and that can cost around £1,200 a week. Now, nursing homes, they provide all of the above, plus medical care from registered nurses, and they can cost £1,500 a week and up. And I've heard a lot of your personal stories where you've been paying a lot more than this. So with these huge figures involved, it's easy to see why people want to try to protect their assets and their inheritance, but gifting isn't usually the way. Now, many of you will have heard about placing a property or an asset in a trust. And there are generally two ways you can set up a trust, but you must seek specialist advice from a solicitor before you take any action. Now, a lifetime trust is an umbrella term for setting up a trust whilst you're alive. You can transfer assets like your home into the trust straight away. There's a lot of different types of trust, and that is why you need specialist advice to understand which of these is going to be most suitable for you. Now, the other option is a will trust, and that's created on your death via your will. So it's only going to come into force once probate has been granted. So for this video, I'm going to focus on the lifetime trust. So if you're finding value in this video about gifting your home and the pros and the cons and perhaps some alternatives, then please hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. It only takes a second, it's completely free, and it does help us to keep creating these videos. So before we look at lifetime trusts, I've got a couple of questions for you. If we all pay national insurance throughout our working lives, should care home fees be funded in the same way as healthcare under the NHS? And the second question is it fair that after decades of paying national insurance, that people in this day and age still have got to sell their homes to cover their care home costs? Let me know in the comments below. So a lifetime trust allows you to move property into a trust whilst you're still living there. And it can offer an avoidance of probate as the house doesn't go through probate when you die. It's also got potential inheritance tax benefits as well, because if the trust is structured correctly and done early enough, it may reduce your inheritance tax bill. Now, it might also offer you protection from care home fees, because unlike gifting, it's going to be hard for councils to claim a deprivation of assets, although the timing is absolutely paramount. Now, one of the downsides is you're going to lose control of the property, and that's because the trustees of the trust are going to have legal title to the property and not you. There's also going to be setup costs, legal fees, ongoing charges as well. So you need to make sure you understand these costs before you move forward, and also check that anyone creating the trust for you are fully qualified. Now, I've heard some very scary stories from you on the previous video, especially when you try to cut corners and to save money. Now, tax rules, as you all know, are going to be very, very complicated, and they can change, so you need expert advice. Now, it's also worth pointing out that lifetime trusts are not going to be available in Scotland, and that's because they've got different legal structures that are going to apply. Now, the key with any estate planning at all is timing. If you act before there's any foreseeable need for care homes or nursing homes, then your planning is less likely to be challenged by the local authority. So once you've received your health diagnosis, or that now there's a clear need for care that's going to exist, then transferring assets into a trust is going to look like a deliberate deprivation of assets. So you should expect to be challenged if you do this by the local authority. So what that means is it's going to be important to start a conversation about your estate planning, whether it's trusts or gifting, in your 50s or early 60s, and not in your late 70s. And that's going to give you and your family a lot more options. And instead of trying to beat the system, perhaps a more sensible and a more logical approach is going to be to plan how care home fees might fit into your overall retirement plan. You might need to accept that some care costs may be inevitable, and then you need to save and invest accordingly. You also need to protect what you can through trusts or even insurance. You need to make sure your will and your estate planning are up to date and they reflect your current wishes. And this is to avoid any panic decisions later on, which often leads to mistakes. So I've linked 2 further videos in this series about how to avoid losing your home to care home fees, and another about whether you should take your tax-free cash or not from age 55. So thank you for watching to the very end, and for your time and for your patience as always. I'm going to see you all again next week.